Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dursey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is, it is Friday, February 10th, and we will hear the presentation, The Promise of Urban Agriculture and Why Planners Should Care. For your content questions, just type those in the Q&A box anytime throughout the presentation. We'll answer those at the end during the Q&A portion. And it would be helpful if you have a question for one of our particular panelists that you state who you want to answer the question. And also, if you have any technical issues, you can feel free to type those as well, and I'll do my best to help you with those. Coming up next on your screen is a list of our sponsoring APA chapters and divisions. Thanks to all those participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and, of course, free to members. And I'm very excited to announce one of our newest webcast partners, the APA Food Systems Division. You'll hear a little bit more about them. They're a newer division, and we're so excited to have them. First of all, we're excited that they're a division. And secondly, we're excited that they're joining us with the webcast series this year and bringing us this session. Coming up next on your screen is a list of our next upcoming sessions. We have 3 coming up in March. Boy, we're booking out already into the summer. We're really excited about our lineup. So you can register for these and all of our upcoming sessions on our website, ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. And of course, these are all available for CM credit. Today's session is worth 1.5 CM credits, and you can log those by heading over to planning.org, log into your My APA account, and then you can either search by today's title or event number, both of which can be found again on our website, ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. And if you're on social media, be sure you like us on Facebook. I post any important date or time changes. I post when we have new sessions available for you to register for. And of course, I try to remember to post what our weekly session is coming up. To that, if you like, you can follow us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. We record all of our sessions and we post them onto our YouTube channel. So if you subscribe, you'll get notified when a new session has been posted. I normally get the Friday webcast up the following Monday. If you head over there, you'll see that we have well over 400 session recordings available at your disposal for free. So again, head over to ohioplanning.org/planning webcast for all the information you need. Type your questions in the Q&A box. We'll get to those at the end during our Q&A portion. And that's it for my housekeeping items. So I am going to turn it over to Molly and Marcia, who are going to kick things off, talk about food systems division, and get things moving.
Oops. Christine, thank you so much. Would you enable screen sharing for me so I can get us started?
Yep, you should be good to go now.
I am good to go.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Of course.
Excellent. Launching in. And I am hoping that looks like slides and nothing else to people. Can I get a nod from Marcia
it's
to
perfect.
say that it is?
Yes.
Excellent. Wonderful.
You're good to go.
Great. Marcia, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Our presentation today is titled The Promise of Urban Agriculture and Why Planners Should Care. Next slide, Molly. This is the result of quite a bit of work that Molly and I have been engaged in through our respective organizations. And we're going to in addition to the introduction and the background about the project and how it came to be, we'll be presenting portions of a module called Defining Urban Agriculture. And then we'll be seeking reflection, feedback, discussion from all of you. We are still in pilot mode for this, and it ultimately will be a full-blown free online course. Just to let you know that now about today's presentation. And I'm Marcia Caton Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of Rooted, which is an urban agriculture and food systems organization in Madison, Wisconsin. I have a master's and PhD in city and regional planning from the Ohio State University. So it's kind of fun to present on an Ohio chapter sponsored webcast. And Molly will introduce herself now.
Certainly. My name is Molly Reardon. I am talking to you today from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am the urban ag specialist, or an urban ag specialist, with the Cornell Small Farms program, which is a program of Cornell University that bridges the gap between university and academia and cooperative extension to look at opportunities for all small farms, no matter how small, to thrive. And we do our work beyond the state of New York, where Cornell is based, and all across the Northeast and around the country and internationally as well. I am also a program manager at Healthcare Without Harm. Urban agriculture is one of my several passions. And I am lucky that that brought me to working with Marcia on the project that we're going to talk about today. And it's also the reason, or one of the reasons that I got involved in the Food Systems Division of APA, of which I am now the chair. So just a little bit about the Food Systems Division. We operate just like all the other interest divisions that you are all likely already members of. And what we're really trying to do is advance food systems planning, because we know that it's a new area for a lot of people who've been in the planning profession for a long time. And we're trying to show people how food is connected across several of the different, more traditional planning practices. We are providing leadership and resources. Some of the resources that you'll see today are actually housed within APA Food, and are the work of people like Marcia, who did a lot of work over many years to take a large group of people who had interest in food systems planning and organize them so that we could become a division as we are today. So our website is there. And we're going to be helped out today by Megan Bucknam, who is on the executive committee of the Food Systems Division. She's going to pop a link in the chat so that you can choose to join the Food Systems Division if you so choose. And our website is there as well, and it's getting updated soon. But first, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to ask if I can hear from all of you. Christine, I'm going to ask you to launch the poll, please. We'd like to get a sense of who's with us today, get a sense of what you know about urban agriculture, how long you've been in practice, where you're practicing. If you're practicing, maybe you're a student joining us, and if so, we welcome you. And yeah, if you are yet a member of the division. So Christine, I'll let you kind of tell us when we're ready to roll with the results.
Yep, I've already launched the poll. I always forget if our panelists can see the poll or not. I know for sure you can't respond to it, but yeah, we're launching the poll, and we'll just give it a few seconds here, and then we can share all the results so everyone else knows who else is on the line.
Excellent, thank you. This would be the place where if I were slightly more prepared, I would have some food-themed poll filling out music. I apologize. I hope you'll just hum to yourself as you're answering these questions. And thanks for letting us know who you are.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it up here. All right, and then I'll share the results. Molly, can you see the results or no?
I can see the results.
Okay,
We can see.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes. So
nice.
We've got a great spread. It's great to see so many of you have been in practice for a while. And also we have some folks who are new to the profession, so welcome. A lot of you are in urban or suburban areas. So wonderful. This is going to be right up your alley, but kind of no matter where you are, some of these principles are still going to apply. Great to see that there's some understanding of urban agriculture and some folks who are well experienced in this. We're going to really want to hear from you later on in the session. So we're grateful for you being here. And there's a lot of folks who have yet to join us. So if you like what you see here, we would welcome you to join, even if you just want to join one of our membership meetings at some point. So thanks so much. I'm going to close out the poll, and I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Oh. I am trying to share my screen so I can click to share my sound, and it is not letting me do that. I do not know why.
We practiced this and everything.
We did. We sure did.
Do you have an option at all to share your screen?
I can share my screen, but I can't share my sound.
Maybe you have to share your screen first. And oh no, that's right. How bizarre.
That's really weird. Well, I think what I'll do is I'll keep going, and then if we can't figure it out, we'll do a little bit of modification. So thanks everyone in advance for being a little bit flexible with us.
I'll be in the background trying to figure things out.
Cool, thanks. So sharing my screen again, back to our slides. So what are we here doing? Let me tell you about it. Way back in 2015, I was approached along with the director of the Cornell Small Farms Program, Anu Rangarajan, by the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service. They were interested in knowing more about urban agriculture because they heard it's kind of a issue of concern, and they've had very little experience in working with urban farmers or in providing resources that were a good fit for urban environments. So they asked us to do a national scan of what's happening in urban agriculture using a commercial lens. The reason that they did that is because USDA AMS Agricultural Marketing Service, that marketing really means that they're looking at farms that are selling the products that they produce. And so that was a differentiation between other forms of urban agriculture, like community gardens. So through this national scan, we interviewed over 150 experts, including farmers, extension agents, and technical assistance providers, foundations, policymakers, planners, researchers, and urban ag advocates. And we ended up doing case studies of 14 farms. And these are in-depth case studies that looked at their business structures, their business model, their production practices, how they sell their product, how they market their products, and other activities they do, like giving tours or offering some sort of educational component. That report, the research was done, like I said, 2015 and 2016. It was released in 2019. If you are going to be at the National Planning Conference and you want to hear about the gap in that publishing, you can come find me here in Philadelphia and I'll tell you that story, but I won't tell it now. And so after we put this report out, several months later, we heard from Marcia and her team at Rooted. They had read it, they were interested in the findings, and together with USDA AMS, we all came around to this idea that research shouldn't just be research, we should be able to put it into practice. And there was a big educational opportunity, not just for growers, which there is, but for planners and policymakers as well. And because of Rooted's expertise in training farmers, we knew that they would be an excellent partner to join together and to build a curriculum to serve each of those audiences. And so that's what we did. We are in a cooperative agreement with USDA AMS again, and building these trainers for farmers, service providers, planners, and policymakers. And you're going to get a taste of the planner side of it today. Marcia, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Molly. So as Molly mentioned, the primary goal of the work that we are presenting to you today is turning recommendations from the Promise of Urban Agriculture report into actionable learning. And we're doing this by developing practical training and educational resources that are available online. And for, I believe, the initial 2 years after these go live, these resources and the courses through Cornell Small Farms program will be available free of charge. We had 3 target audiences principally in mind when we drafted our cooperative agreement. One is farmers and nonprofit employees engaged in commercial urban farming. This is a sphere that my organization Rooted knows quite a bit about. We've been around and farming for 20 years inside the city limits in Madison, at a place called Troy Gardens, which may be familiar to some of you from other resources that you've seen over time. We also were very interested in helping support policy and planning officials as they make their decisions about how best to support commercial urban farming. And part of what we wanted to do here was expand the understanding of this audience, the policy and planning official audience, from that urban agriculture extends beyond farmers markets and community gardening, which are sort of the gateways to urban agriculture in almost any context, whether you're growing or you're making policy or enforcing local regulations. And then finally, our third audience is nonprofit employees and extension educators. In the time that I have been working in this sphere, the couple of decades, it's very clear that if you are, if you come from a farming background, principally, understanding nonprofit structure and how that can support urban agriculture has a learning curve to it. And by the same token, if you are an organization that has not engaged in urban agriculture but is headed down that path, there's a lot to learn. So these are the ways that we thought about turning this work into actionable learning, and in particular focusing on commercial urban farms as the interest and audience for farming as a livelihood and an activity in urban areas and in suburban areas. It has interest in that has been increasing. So I'm ready for the next slide, Molly. Aha, there you go.
And that's me. So the planners course that we're designing, we use this learner-centered approach that we focused on to arrive on 4 primary learning outcomes. First, to help planners and policymakers, they choose to take the course, to identify how urban agriculture relates to broader planning priorities in cities, towns, and suburbs. To describe how zoning and comprehensive planning influence urban agriculture outcomes. To integrate urban agriculture efforts into emerging areas of planning, like sustainability and equity. And finally, to employ strategies and techniques that foster inclusive community engagement processes. So we're not just looking at the what of urban agriculture, we're looking at the how are different parts of a planner's toolkit impacting urban agriculture, how could they benefit urban agriculture, and how could urban agriculture benefit planners' other priorities. To that end, we have 6 modules in the curriculum, which is all online. We're using the platform Teachable, and we split it up into 6 modules. Each of them, we think, is going to be a little over an hour of learning content, plus a lot of external resources for people to learn more, as well as some kind of takeaways, handouts, interactive pieces that can support planners in building out a portfolio around urban agriculture and to deepen their learning and their knowledge. So here are the 6 modules. First, we define what urban ag is. Then we look at what its value can be in urban and peri-urban areas. And so we're both talking about dollar value, and we're talking about social value and environmental value. Next, we look at comprehensive planning and how urban ag can show up in comprehensive plans and how comp planning can affect urban agriculture. Fourth, we look at zoning considerations for urban agriculture. I think it's usually the place where people go to first, but we're really trying to ground everyone in an understanding of what urban ag is so that the zoning considerations have a little bit more context. Then we're going to look specifically at creating urban agriculture plans. There are several municipalities around the country that are building urban ag plans, several regional planning entities that are building urban ag plans. So we look at how those have been created in different places. And then finally, and this is peppered throughout as well, but the last module is really thinking about effective engagement strategies. Urban ag is different from other forms of planning in that, or similar in some ways to some of them, but the folks who are doing it have often been on the margins because sometimes it's not codified at all. Sometimes they are doing things on the edge of legality. And often urban ag is a measure of self-determination. People are looking to make their own path. They're not necessarily looking to work within the system. That doesn't mean that what they're doing is wrong or what they're doing is not beneficial to the jurisdiction they're in. But they really need to be brought in because it's not necessarily the same group who's showing up to planning board meetings. It's not the same group that's showing up for other community meetings because they're farming. So what does it take to engage these farmers and bring them in and urban ag advocates and work together? That's what Module 6 is all about. So this is where a little bit of this kind of flexible facilitation is going to come in. We're going to launch the actual teachable platform so you can get a flavor for what we are showing in this course. And we're going to look at the first module of the course. And there are several questions here, but basically what we're just looking for is your feedback. What do you want to know? What should we add or take away? What would make this more useful to you? And I hope that you'll share that in the Q&A as we go. We'll ask for this again, and we'll reflect on some of this in the Q&A as well. There'll also be an evaluation at the end. So if there's something that's glaring or you feel like needs more consideration, we're going to share that evaluation link so you can add comments there too, because you're really going to be helping us to make sure that this is as relevant for planners as possible. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, and I'm going to try to reshare it to be able to share my sound as well.
It's not working now for me either. So I'm not sure what happened.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'll do is I will launch the program. And there are a couple of places where there are videos, and we're not going to be able to share them. But what I could do is I could share a couple of links in the chat that would take anybody who's viewing this on a platform where they feel like they can have multiple windows open to look at the videos later on YouTube. That might be the best that we can do, short of just having you all sit in silence and watch these mouths move.
Hold on, I might have been able to fix it.
Oh.
Try sharing again.
Okay.
And tell me if your little button.
It works.
Stop it.
Just in time.
I figured it out.
Just in time, Christine. All right. We are back on. Marcia, I can see your face. Does this look like teachable to you?
It does.
Excellent. All right. So what we're going to do now is take you into the course. This is what Teachable looks like in draft form. And a lot of this is in draft form. It'll be a little bit prettier, so you have that caveat. But I am going to, for anybody who's not, doesn't have the screen up in front, if you're multitasking, that's totally fine. I will read out loud what's on the screen because it's probably also a little bit small to read in the share mode right now. But I'll read it and then I will play videos, and then I'll kind of move sequentially through a couple of these different parts of the module so you can see what it's all about. First, we have an upfront intro about why planners might consider taking this course. So in it, we explain what people are going to be able to do by the end of it. By the end of this course, you will be able to first explain how urban agriculture relates to broader planning priorities in cities, towns, and suburbs. Second, you're going to be able to describe how zoning and comprehensive planning influence urban agriculture outcomes. Third, you're going to integrate urban agriculture efforts into emerging areas of planning like sustainability and equity. This all sounds familiar from my presentation, right? And fourth, you're going to be able to articulate strategies and techniques to foster inclusive community engagement processes that can be used to support urban agriculture planning. So those are our learning objectives. And here you're going to awkwardly hear me talking a little bit more about why you might be interested. Welcome to the Promise of Urban Agriculture, Skills for Planners. This 6-part course is designed for urban, suburban, and regional planners by planners to develop a common understanding of the types, value, and opportunities to plan for food production in urban and peri-urban areas. This course is based on findings from a report also titled The Promise of Urban Agriculture, conducted by the Cornell Small Farms Program in partnership with the United States Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Marketing Service. That report interviewed urban growers, planners, and other experts across the United States to investigate, among other things, what conditions must be present in an urban or peri-urban area for commercial urban agriculture to thrive. That report found that many policies, regulations, programs, and beliefs contributed to an environment that facilitates or hinders urban agriculture. And many of those factors are influenced by local planners. Because that report generated interest from the planning community, and because urban agriculture is dealt with so differently across jurisdictions, we developed this course to help planners, whether they be from big cities, suburbs, small towns, or other non-rural spaces, to understand why urban agriculture may have more to offer jurisdictions than meets the eye, and how planners can best support their own goals and those of urban farmers and gardeners. By the end of this course, you will be able to explain how urban agriculture relates to broader planning priorities in cities, towns, and suburbs, describe how zoning and comprehensive planning influence urban agriculture outcomes, integrate urban agriculture efforts into emerging areas of planning, like sustainability or equity, and articulate strategies and techniques that foster inclusive community engagement processes that can be used to support urban agriculture planning processes. The designers of this course recognize that each jurisdiction's planning requirements, zoning codes, intersecting regulatory bodies and authorities, and capacity for growing food in non-agricultural areas is unique. That is why this course includes stories from real planners from towns and cities across the United States, because learning from your professional peers is a great way to apply ideas in practice. We also provide resources that you can use on the job, including reports, sample plans, and other easy-to-use tools that can help you integrate your understanding of urban agriculture into your broader planning practice. The course also includes a few brief quizzes to test your knowledge
and downloadable takeaways that will help you build your portfolio of expertise related to urban agriculture. We hope that this dynamic course will meaningfully add to your planning toolkit and support your work, whether you're addressing urban agriculture, other food systems issues, or simply the day-to-day work. Thank you for your interest in pursuing the promise of urban agriculture.
Okay, so that's an example of what a video would look like. And then I'm guessing, I probably should have asked this in the evaluation, how many of you have taken online courses before, but they operate pretty similarly to other resources, online resources that you're familiar with. You know, you click complete and continue, and then we kind of move on from there. And so now I wanted to get into module 1. I'm going to show you a couple of different types of, a couple of different parts of the module that show the different types of learning resources we are trying to make available. So the first, defining urban agriculture. This is straightforward, just text how we define urban agriculture. And I don't want to say much more about it. You can kind of take a look there, what we're trying to do in the module, just setting it up. Then, in order to orient everyone, not everyone who is interested in urban ag necessarily has a deep agricultural understanding, and so we try to talk about the history of agriculture in cities. We start by talking about the history of agriculture in the United States. This course is focused primarily on the U.S. because that's where the research was focused, and it's funded by USDA. And so we do talk about the injustice that pervades agriculture from before the founding of the country, when the first settlers came and started to push indigenous residents and indigenous populations out of their land and starting to farm it through chattel slavery and continued exploitation today of farm workers in certain sectors. And it's important to know that, in part, and I'm going to read now down below about the planner's role and how this all fits together. The history of U.S. agriculture reflects themes that planners must contend with today: segregation and disinvestment based on racism and xenophobia, evolving knowledge about disease prevention and public health, urbanization and the boom-bust cycles of commerce, trade, and technology. So much did the growth of cities and the emergence of the planning profession shape where and how food is produced that planning made urban agriculture something of an oxymoron. So what we do is start to talk about the history of urbanization and agriculture in cities to kind of show how we got to where we are now, where we're trying to bring farming back when farming was there at the beginning. In the interest of time, I'm only going to show a portion of this clip, and then I'm going to stop it awkwardly and keep going because there's more stuff that I want you to see.
To understand more about why urban food production may be desirable today, let's look back at the historical context of growing food in cities. Because this course is based on findings from within the United States of America, and because of the unique way the planning profession evolved in the United States and in Western cultures, this history starts in the colonial era. The reason for this Western colonial perspective is that the separation of land use between lands that provide food and lands that are used for other purposes is a particularly Western phenomenon. City planning itself is rooted in Eurocentric values of order and separation of uses. Those values imply beliefs and biases about what functions are to be valued in society and which are not, values that are informed by capitalism and class hierarchy. The developers of this course do not mean to imply that this is the way that it ought to be. Rather, it is important to understand how urban agriculture came to seem oxymoronic, when a few hundred years ago, producing food where groups of people lived was the norm. Colonial settlements depend on urban agriculture for the simple reason that colonists had to eat. This map of New York City from 1767 shows the settlement of what today is known as the island of Manhattan. The area at the northernmost point of the map indicates farmland in the area that today is roughly the neighborhoods of Soho and Little Italy. Granted, colonial settlements more closely resembled tiny villages than cities, but it is worth remembering that nearly every U.S. city exists today because it was once a place where people could grow or trade food. Density in cities increased during industrialization and the rise of manufacturing, due to factories' high labor needs. Density was not well planned, however, and low-wage factory workers lived close together in tenements or other low-cost housing that often did not include running water or toilets. Unsanitary living conditions, along with pollution caused by factories whose air and water impacts were not regulated, led policymakers and early city planners, not to mention farmers themselves, to relocate food production from cities to ex-urban areas.
I'm going to stop it there in the interest of time, but we kind of move through, there's a couple of different videos moving through the history of urban agriculture to where we are today. So moving on, just to show another type of resource. One of the things that we thought was really important to do in the content development of this course is to pull from existing plans and existing resources, because there's so much great work that has been done around urban agriculture planning so far, and we want to lift up those jurisdictions and consultant groups and anybody else who's contributing to the knowledge of urban agriculture. So we define urban agriculture the way that it's defined in the 2019 report. We define urban as places where concentrations of people whose lives are organized around non-agricultural activities, or where agriculture is not the primary land use, and there may be competing land uses. That's what urban means to us. And agriculture, for the purposes of the study and for what we were talking about here, we were focusing primarily on operations that grow food for human consumption, though we fully acknowledge that there's commercial urban agriculture and community gardening that focuses on flowers, beekeeping, other forms of growing as well. And so we wanted to share those different growing types. And so this is an excellent resource actually from here in Philadelphia. Interface Studio and Soil Generation were the team that are continuing to write the urban agriculture plan for Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. And I know it's really hard to see in the shared screen, but they have an excellent diagram of what different garden farm types look like. Moving on, let's get to why planners should care about urban agriculture. That's the title of this presentation, after all. So what we say, and I will read this for anybody who's not able to see this on their screen, urban agriculture plays a role in several areas of concern for planners: community and economic development, climate change adaptation, public health and equity. There's a little bit more text there, but I'm just going to kind of move us forward. And then we offer a chart from KFF, the Kaiser Family Foundation, that talks about how the social determinants of health, and when we tie urban agriculture to some of those same social determinants of health, and we offer a link for it as well. One of the things that we try to do in the course is to mix up how people are interacting with the content. So there's a little bit of reading, a little bit of video, the opportunity to go check out deeper reading and further resources. We have some research that we point people toward, like this NSF-funded report that shows that the ecosystem benefits of urban ag could be as high as $33 billion through food produce, energy savings, nitrogen sequestration, et cetera. And that is on a global scale, not just looking at the US, but really want to point people toward more information that can help them think in a more complex ways about urban ag. Moving on, I'm going to go to what is commercial urban agriculture. This is a short video just describing what we mean by commercial urban agriculture. I already talked about it a little bit, so again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to play the video. You know what it's like to see me talking at this point. But what I do want to point you to as well is that we're also trying to, as often as possible, help people see what's happening in other areas. And so we do point to a couple of different news clips and things like that. And I'm going to play one from Kansas City, and which is one of the places that I got to visit as part of the case study research. So here, I'll play this clip right now.
Two groups are now coming together to bring farmers from all over the world here to Kansas City.
And they're not just farmers, they are refugees escaping religious and political persecution back home.
This is a story you will only see right here. 41 Action News reporter Ariel Rothfield shows us how this new program is bridging the gap between life in their former country and life here in the U.S. Juniper Gardens is about 10 acres. Farmers here are growing mint, lettuce, onions, radishes, and cilantro. But most importantly, they're growing a community.
As children play in the fields, Linlin sits in her garden picking off weeds.
Yeah, first time is hard work. Yeah, right now is it's okay.
She's thousands of miles away from her home country of Burma, where she escaped religious and ethnic persecution like the others working on the farm.
You can't really lead them, you can only talk and show.
Sammy Davis is the site manager at Juniper Gardens, a plot of land in KCK that hosts the new Roots for Refugees program. Here, all of the students are refugees who were farmers in their homeland and are now learning about the land, the crops, and weather outside Kansas City.
The farmers each have a quarter acre and they're planting carrots and spinach in February. They're putting radishes and beets in March, and now they're harvesting the fruit of that labor.
They're also learning how to navigate a new life in a different country, picking up skills that will help them sell goods in a market and be successful for their families. Linlin has 3 children, all under the age of 6.
Right now is trying, you know.
Very hard work, but it's a love. If you don't love it, it's even harder, you know, and I guess, and loving it makes the hard work worth the whole effort.
Linlin does have 3 more years left of the program. She hopes to start her own business after that. Reporting in Kansas City, Kansas, Ariel Rothfield, 41 Action News.
Well, the refugee program is sponsored by Catholic Charities and Cultivate Kansas City. We have more information on how you can help. Just head to our website, kshb.com.
All right, so wanted to show that because there's a lot in that video that can help people think about the role of urban agriculture. So welcoming new Americans, refugees from other countries, and giving them opportunities, economic opportunities. This organization also offers job training skills and language training as well. So that's huge. There's community development pieces of that. There's a lot to it, and we want to be able to point to those examples. So switching back to the curriculum, one of the other things that we really want to do in this curriculum is allow participants to hear from farmers. And so I'm actually going to go to this video because I think it's going to play better off of this window. Hear from farmers and hear from planners. And so here's a video, and I won't do too much of an intro, but there's a piece here about how zoning has impacted this farmer's ability to get a federal grant. And it's kind of worth hearing her story because there's a lot that planners see a slice of that ends up impacting farmers in a broader way. Oops, it would be better if I started from the beginning.
My name is Stacy Givens, and I am the owner of the Side Yard Fireman Kitchen in Portland, Oregon. The land that we're currently on now, I got about 8 years ago. These folks came by and they're like, hey, we just bought this huge parcel of land. You've probably seen it. It's right down the street from you. It's about an acre. We'd love for you to farm it. turn it into what you've already done here at this farm. And I said, I know exactly the property you're talking about. So I was like, cool, I'm gonna inquire about the woman farmer's loan. That's what I'm gonna do. USDA has this awesome thing. I'm a woman farmer. I've been doing this. At that point, it was 12 years. So I got denied right away. I just kept bugging the USDA, and they just said I'm zone residential. I'm not zone agricultural, so that is why I don't fall in the lines. I'm like, well, something needs to change because we're right in the middle of the city. We've been here 12 years, and we feed our community. And I have the opportunity to buy this piece of land, and I want to preserve it as an urban farm forever. We purchased it in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, and yeah, and it is in the contract that this will always be preserved as an urban farm. I was told that from here on out, any urban farmer in the United States that wants to purchase their land, they're able to do that now because basically they allowed me to do it. They won't have to go through all the hoops that I did. I would advise any urban farmer that is trying to get an FSA loan to purchase their land to just not give up, and then just be upfront from the beginning, state their case, state their story, state how long they want to farm that property, why they're doing what they're doing, and the impact that it's going to cause for the future. I think that's really important. That's really what the FSA and USDA wants to know before they grant you this amazing loan to buy your property. I think that when I started Side Yard, I never knew what it would be, what it is today. Like, I feel that we exceeded the goals that were laid out from the beginning.
I'm going to pause it there. Now, what's important for planners to think about in this video? Obviously, they don't work for the USDA, they don't work for the FSA, they can control that piece, but a couple of things that I think that are key here, and Stacy was one of our case study farmers. Even to get onto the land and to be able to farm, she really had to find a champion within her local government that could help to define her ability to farm legally on the land that she owned. And so she is zoned residential, but worked with her planner over several years to make sure that her type of farming was an allowable use. And so that is huge. And it reminds us that urban farmers are not just dealing with local government, they're dealing with government at all different levels and in all different areas. And so when we're thinking about the complexity of regulating urban agriculture, it's sometimes better to regulate less than more. But you really have to kind of like juggle your own jurisdiction's needs and priorities and concerns as you're thinking about what it means to allow or disallow a farm like the Side Yard Farm in Portland, Oregon, that is really doing some amazing work in the community as well as feeding people. The last thing I want to show you, last resource that's part of this module, we have little quizzes. We're not going to do a quiz since we didn't look at all the content, but each module has portfolio pieces, and what these are PDFs that you can either use on your computer or you can print out if you're more of a print person, that can help you put what you've learned in the module into practice. So this first one is all about creating your own urban agriculture inventory. And so what that's about is just like understanding really getting clear on what your goals are around urban agriculture for either yourself in your job title or your job role, or for your agency. And then to think about your urban agriculture network. Who can you engage? Who can you learn from that can help you to better understand what the issues are, what the needs are, and how, and if you don't know them, who can connect you? So starting to build that network. And that'll come in that will come in handy, later when we get into more of that kind of community building and kind of strategic engagement piece. Third is thinking about your physical assets in your jurisdiction. So whether it's open space or buildings, controlled environment agriculture is a big use, or an emerging use or emerging field in urban agriculture. So what are the opportunities there? And then finally, the policy and programming landscape. For those of you who work in a public agency, you know that for any given topic, there are a lot of other agencies that touch it. And so what are some of the policies or programs or priorities in your jurisdiction that are coming to the top where there might be an overlap in urban agriculture? As we saw in the video from Kansas City, they are receiving and welcoming many people who are refugees coming from other countries. And so that's can be a drain on resources and something that planners need to think about when they're thinking about housing and the like. And so is there an urban ag overlap there with something that's a big priority like that? And obviously in Kansas City, they found that yes, there is an overlap and there's something we can do about it. So the final thing that I'll show you is that we're also incorporating, none of them are done yet, some story maps to kind of bring this content to life and show people what's happening in different areas. This is an excellent, if it loads, it was loaded earlier. This is an excellent resource from Esri, Green on Gray. Several of you have probably seen this already, and it does a great job of doing a couple of case studies about urban agriculture in different jurisdictions. There's Stacey Givens again. She's like the poster child of urban ag, apparently. And so we're going to be creating things like this from our content in order to have a different way to engage with some of the learning. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to stop talking for a minute, and I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to start again, and we can close out our slides and I can hand it back over to Marcia. And Marcia's going to share a little bit about the other side of the work, which is a grower's curriculum, which may also be of interest to folks. So, sorry, let me just get back to share my screen. Take it away, Marcia.
Thanks, Molly. And we're just showing here again. Tell us in the Q&A, and I've taken a quick look as we've gone along. Folks are adding what they want to know, what they'd like to share. Please, again, keep doing that, and we'll respond to things in the discussion after the presentation. So parallel to the planner's curriculum is a grower's curriculum, which is being developed for people who have 2 to 3 years or seasons of growing experience. So this is not for someone who's never done this before, but it is for someone who has enough experience that they may want to scale up a little bit or launch out on their own. And so you can see in the 4 boxes the learning outcomes and content, that kind of content that's included in the grower's curriculum. There is a significant section of the first course of the grower's curriculum, similarly to the planner's curriculum, on community engagement, interacting with local government and with planners, planning considerations, and that sort of thing. Our grower's curriculum will ultimately be 3 courses long, touching on deciding where to farm in the city, which includes a USDA module that allows folks to explore the resources, the FSA resources, the USDA grant program resources, and the like, so that they can, because it is difficult to navigate USDA, even if you're experienced at it. The second course has to do with commercial urban agriculture planning and management. So this is everything from farm production and season extension to planning for long-term financial viability, assessing your markets, coming up with the appropriate blend for your situation of wholesale versus retail versus direct sales, value-added products, all of that kind of thing. And then the third course has to do with that practice of commercial urban agriculture by nonprofit organizations that I referenced earlier in the presentation. And so these 3 courses, course 1 is being piloted right now with different communities of growers and growers who are part of the advisory board for this project. And courses 2 and 3 are in development currently. Molly, I think I'll hand it back to you, or maybe I have another slide yet. Story map case studies. In addition to all of the content that you've seen so far, and the growers curriculum looks very much the same in Teachable, the same kinds of video snippets and resources and other kinds of things, we will have a story map website that is tied to this project specifically. Some of you may be familiar with the Fridays on the Farm series that USDA Agricultural Marketing Service has currently, story maps where you can explore different regions of the country, look at what AMS grantees are doing as farmers, the issues that they're confronting, the things that they're working on. This story map pertaining to this project will have more case studies. There are in-depth case studies that have been done as part of the original report, but this will supplement that with maps of other urban agriculture projects around the country of varying sizes and scales, urban, suburban, peri-urban, and essentially give you windows into how this is done in other places, including how it's done effectively in various jurisdictions from a planning perspective.
Thanks, Marcia. So just to kind of refresh your what you saw, this is kind of an overview of what you've seen already, the different delivery mechanisms, the different topics just in this first module. And like we said, that there are 6 modules, and if you have any questions about any of them, we're happy to talk about them. And so again, we're just gonna, ask, what you think, and we'll get the conversation started. And I'll also ask in the chat, and I might be able to do this too once I stop sharing my screen, we would love your feedback. I don't expect you to type that out there. I'm gonna put a Google form in the chat, and I would love your feedback. You're really going to help us to shape and to refine what we're doing here, and we're looking forward to the conversation. We'll close out by just putting up our team information for a second. Marcia's name is second from the top there, and her email, and my Cornell email is down there under the planner's curriculum as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we have just hit 2 o'clock. That means it's time for Q&A. Am I right?
Yes, look at you guys, right on schedule. So folks, again, just as everyone has been saying, just type those questions in, or your comments as well, and we'll be sure to get to them. So I think, and also folks, don't forget to look in the chat feature for some of the links from things that our panelists have been speaking about, so that you can get more info. I'm about to send another one. Can't do 2 things at once. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So I kind of want to start, I guess, with an overarching question. And that is for those of us that are on the line that are planners for communities, no matter what size, no matter if they're urban or suburban, exurban, whatever it might be. And if there isn't any kind of like a established zoning practice or ordinance or anything related to urban agriculture, where do they start? What do they do? Who do they partner with? Who are some of the local partners that communities should be reaching out to kind of hold their hand and develop relationships with urban farmers, and to potentially get amendments made to really offer opportunities for agriculture in areas that traditionally it hasn't been allowed. So that's a really big overarching question, and you can take whatever time you need on it and go wherever you want with it. But I just think for those that are on the line that are like, we've never done this, I don't know anything about it, this is my first introduction to it, who do I need to talk to first? What do I need to do? Where do I start? It's a little daunting, right?
I think that the resource that Molly showed about the urban agriculture inventory for your local jurisdiction is a great place to start, because it allows you to assess the lay of the land in terms, pardon the pun, in terms of who is there a community gardens network? Do you have a number of community gardens in town? Are there urban farmers in your town who are doing, or in your jurisdiction, who are, as Molly described earlier, sort of working at the bounds of what is allowable in a jurisdiction. There are lots of ways to enter into that space. I guess in the places that I have been involved in urban agriculture in Wisconsin cities, very often there's a convening of some kind where you just invite all sorts of interested parties to talk about the various issues. The other thing is to do an assessment of your jurisdiction's regulatory environment. This is a little more detailed than what Molly presented, but there are a number of tools out there, and in particular, I want to call people's attention to one that was developed at the University of Virginia by Tanya Denkla-Cobb and her students, that just essentially assesses where is urban agriculture mentioned or touched on in the zoning code, in the building code, in any other type of aspect of city regulatory policy. And it shows up in different places depending on your jurisdiction. Things can show up in the Department of Neighborhood Services, for example, if you have one, the way the city of Milwaukee does, or they can show up in zoning. There are a number of issues that arise in urban agriculture contexts from the state building code. That's one we're wrestling with in Wisconsin right now, related to how long you can keep your hoop house structures up. And so there are a variety of other, things to think about. Very often in thinking about urban agriculture, the natural pairing is with public health and social determinants of health. And this is an excellent pairing. However, you often get more traction. It's an excellent and natural pairing, given the origins of planning as a profession. You often get more traction at the local government level in creating change by working with the economic development department and pointing to how this kind of activity, commercial urban agriculture, can create jobs, can create sources of income, various other things. I think, this does not originate with me, but the person I heard speak to this, who was the most influential from a planning and regulatory environment perspective, was Baltimore's former food czar, Holly Freshstedt. And I highly recommend looking at everything the city of Baltimore has done in that regard. The city of Boston also has done some incredible work. There are many other jurisdictions that have, and I'll turn it over to Molly.
Everything that Marcia said, and don't be afraid to kind of think about who else is in your jurisdiction, but maybe who isn't working at the same local level that you are. So there are local EPA agents, there are local extension agents, so people at the state level, people at the federal level who are actually working locally, because they're probably hearing from someone that something isn't working out. So they can maybe start you on the right path. Also, a lot of areas, maybe not in your jurisdiction specifically, but maybe in your region, have food policy councils, food policy advisory councils, action councils. You can Google it and see if there's someone around, because there's a lot of them. And the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future has a kind of inventory of all of the active food policy councils that are out there. So they're a resource as well. But like Marcia said, I think not having to reinvent the wheel is huge. And so looking at what other jurisdictions that might be of your size or similar demographic makeup might be worth it. Growing Food Connections is one of many resources that is actually, it's housed at the University of Buffalo through their food lab. One of many places where there are ordinances, plans, policies that are being housed and like archived. So you can look at some things that have been done in other places and even start to copy some of the language if it makes sense to you.
I'm a firm believer in not reinventing the wheel. Share all the resources possible. And kind of keeping with this sort of like overarching questions, I'd like to talk for a moment about some of the barriers to doing this, and one in particular, and that's the next door neighbor. We talk about in planning NIMBYism, and there are a couple of questions or comments that came through, and personal experience right here. I have a neighbor like 4 houses down that just installed like an indoor vegetable garden in their sunroom. And you can see it at night halfway down the road because they have all those tube lights, for it's a whole thing. Like it's very, obviously it's very illegal in terms of just all of the light pollution that's coming off of it. But my point is, how do we address some of those issues, whether it be, folks that are trying to do, some hobby farming in their backyard, or even, there's a question about, urban gardens that might also then double as a wedding venue or a place to host parties or farmers markets. And all of a sudden you're kind of opening it up further into, areas that might not make the neighbors happy. Where's the line drawn? How do you deal with that? What are some things to take into consideration, just to be sensitive of everyone and get everybody on board?
Well, I assume all of us like to eat multiple times a day in many instances. And so, one of the best ways that we've found as an organization that practices urban agriculture in multiple locations of varying scales in Madison, that simply sharing some of the produce or sharing some of the honey from the beehives or some of the eggs from the chickens, just getting to know your neighbors, having those over the fence conversations is really, really helpful. Often, if you're keeping livestock or bees, livestock meaning chickens typically, it's rare that anything else is allowed. And in answer to someone's question in the Q&A, it's usually 4 to 8 chickens, 4 to 8 hens, no rooster, that is allowed in backyard chicken keeping in many jurisdictions around the US. So, just having those conversations and inviting people to come and walk through your property, walk your land, give a tour of what's going on, engage them in that way. Sometimes farm dinners are held depending on the scale of the property. And again, and making sure your neighbors are, and hearing your neighbors' concerns are important things. So, everyone hates the suburban lawnmower running at 7 a.m. on Saturday or Sunday. And, similarly, if you're using equipment at all, just be sensitive to the neighborhood that you're working in. Someone in the Q&A also asked about composting. The scale of composting is
just going to mention that too.
Is typically regulated by
code compliance.
Yeah, it's typically regulated. Can be regulated by different at different scales by different things. So, for example, for a number of years, I was a board member of the late great organization known as Growing Power, that was in Milwaukee. And their composting reached a level at which they needed to find off-site locations to compost because they had too much volume for DNR regulations in an urban area. So, you just have to be sensitive to what those things are.
And those issues did come up in the original research. There's a farm in Austin that is no longer in business, and they were doubling as a wedding venue. They allowed a food truck to be on site several days a week. It's a 5-acre site, so it wasn't small. It was a pretty decent size, but it was in East Austin, which is gentrifying rapidly. And their farm in particular became a touch point. They were allowed to do a lot of what they did because they happened to be zoned commercially. But then that meant that they were also zoned commercially. So they had to put in ADA parking and curb cuts and exit signs. They had a wager that they were the only outdoor urban farm that had illuminated exit signs at night, which obviously is also not so great. But, there's the point being, a lot of the ways that we regulate other uses don't fit well for urban ag on either side of the equation. And so, Christine, your down the street neighbor with their bright lights, obviously that's a violation. And yes, and so that would be something that would have to be brought into compliance. And at the same time, on the risk of over-regulating some of these functions, it can have deleterious effects to the urban farms, but also to other potential uses in the future. And so what we're saying in the course is really think about what it is that you're trying to achieve, and know that, yes, there are always going to be complaints, but yes, for goodness sake, make sure that there's some sort of rule about compost and a method to deal with it at the very least, right? So I would say don't be fearful, but like anything that we regulate, there will be problems. So we can just be thoughtful and look to other places that have done it well and kind of learn from their wins and their mistakes.
And I'd like to say it's not so much about the light pollution, it's the fact that I haven't been invited over to get any yield from them, right?
And so you can kind of to the side also be like, be nice, guys. Just be a nice farmer.
Right? Let's have a picnic.
Let's have a picnic.
Be a decent person.
Right. I might just knock on their door anyway. So I'd like to talk a little bit. There's a theme running through some of these questions about getting the land, getting available land. And there's some questions about, do you have good case studies of folks going through like land banks or land trusts or preservation programs? There's another question about, hey, what about funding to clean up brownfields and converting them to urban ag? Is that a thing? Like it seems a little contradictory that you'd have a brownfield that then you would use for urban agriculture, but it's a thing. So if you could speak a little bit to the specific type of partners or opportunities to secure land, whether it be 5 acres or, a couple yards, whatever size it might be, if you could speak to that.
Sure. So urban agriculture is practiced on land that growers own, land that they lease. We lease land from a community land trust. We lease 26 acres of open space in Madison from a community land trust that owns the land. There are land banks in cities around the country. Cleveland has a good land bank going. Shout out to Cleveland for Christine. So there are a variety of ways of approaching this. Typically, it is practiced on vacant parcels, and land is easier to come by in older industrial cities that have a lot of vacant parcels. So cities like Madison or like Portland, Oregon, or San Francisco are much more difficult places to access land for urban growing simply because the land values are so high. So I'll park that there and answer the brownfields question. So brownfields designation, as I imagine most people on this webinar know, is defined at the federal level, and then cleanup standards are implemented at the state level. And brownfields, I've had experience with brownfields cleanup. Our organization has done some of that over time. I've also been involved in policy contexts where it's been in cities where it's been done. The challenge is that the time and expense of the phase 1 and sometimes phase 2 environmental assessments involved in brownfields cleanup is prohibitive for practitioners of urban agriculture and for communities of people who want to start a community garden. And by the way, community gardens are not a if you build it, they will come kind of thing. They are the group forms and then finds land. That's how it works best. And so, for example, in the city of Milwaukee, there was a former paint factory parking lot where Hmong growers were growing. So we have large Hmong refugee and immigrant population in Wisconsin. They were growing. It was determined that the site was a brownfield. The growers were moved off the land for a bit, and the 3/4 of an acre site was remediated to the tune of $100,000 because it was a city-owned property. The city footed the bill. Sometimes you can get grant money and money from EPA for cleanup, but for smaller urban agriculture projects, that's a challenge. And then the growers came back onto the land, and the city of Milwaukee at that point decided that they just couldn't bear the expense of doing those kinds of things. Between that kind of experience and experience that other cities have, just with, when people want to grow food for consumption, they don't want to have to wait 18 months to 2 years to do it. And they also may not have the money to support a full-blown cleanup. So then that's when you go to clay cap or fabric barrier with 18 to 24 inches of clean fill on top for people to grow. And that typically, or raised bed gardening with those land barriers between the contaminated land and the growing space. There's been a lot of talk over the years about phytoremediation and bioremediation for community. That becomes an equity issue for people who want and need to grow food. There isn't time for that. So one of the ways of thinking about this is how can you do this most efficiently and cost effectively for the people involved.
Slam dunk. I got nothing to add to that, Marcia. And for anybody who doesn't know, Marcia is one of the greatest thinkers on urban agriculture in the country. She kind of made this a part of the planning field, and so you're really getting some hot tips from the OG here.
Well, I've been on both sides of it. I've been on the research side as a member of the UW-Madison faculty and helping to develop that field with Jerry Kaufman and other planners from back in the day. And also for the last 15 years, I've been on the practitioner side. So I know a little about it.
Next question. There's another trend going on here. There's more specific questions about parts of a zoning code that, at least if you've seen, have to be amended in order to incorporate urban agriculture. Do you know, just from your experience, what parts of the zone, are there more than one parts of a zoning code that really have to address this? I know, there's options for commercial and residential, but where else does language need to exist within a zoning code to support good urban agriculture?
Molly, go.
A bunch of things. So setbacks and appropriate setbacks for different types of uses. Beekeeping is absolutely safe and totally fine so long as bees have a long enough flyaway zone so they can get up and above your neighbor's fence. Structures and what is considered a permanent structure is huge. So in a lot of instances, because farms are very small, they're wanting to produce for as much of the season as possible. So they use what we call season extension, but are called hoop houses or high tunnels, those loopy things with the plastic over them. In some places, they are considered a temporary structure. which means that they can only be up for 6 months, but that doesn't help if you want to produce for 12. And so thinking through that and whether or not that they ought to be designated that way is a place to have some consideration. I know that Marcia's had to do some creative things around that as well. Structures also means things like sheds and offices. A lot of times these farms are not contiguous to the places people are living. In some instances they are, because of side lot programs that allow a resident to get access to their side lot. That's Detroit. It's one of the first places that really made that possible, but oftentimes it's not. And if they're trying to run a business out of it, then they're going to need a bathroom or at least electricity to have a light and plug in a printer and charge their phones. So those types of structures and thinking about accessory use or being able to have a structure like that without having a primary residence or something like that on the lot would also be really important. Fencing. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I?
I'm gonna stop because there's so many places.
Yeah, I'm thinking about various other accessory structures. So there's the growing in the hoop house, but when you harvest, the first thing you want to do is cool your vegetables down to preserve their freshness. And so urban farmers need wash pack sheds, so they need access to water, and they need a cooler or some kind of refrigerated, I don't know, everything from a small refrigerated shed style thing to, a larger, like a container from a container ship that can be retrofitted to function as a cooler. A lot of times it's hard to come up with electricity. So for Troy Farm is 22 years old, and the farm that my organization runs. And until the last 3 years, we've not had well water or electricity on site. So we're now making those retrofits to improve, and that's for a 250 member CSA farm. So lots of things like that need to be taken into consideration. From a zoning perspective, one of the easiest modifications you can make to a zoning ordinance is to have agriculture or community gardening as a conditional use. And a lot of times those things are allowable those activities are allowable as conditional uses in residential and commercial districts. In the city of Milwaukee, every single zoning district allows urban agriculture or allows agricultural activities as a conditional use, subject to permitting and review and all of that kind of stuff. And then just from a grower's perspective or a practitioner's perspective, it's really helpful to be able to easily navigate the maze of local regulatory environments. So if growers know where to go next, where to go with their permit, if they need to pull a permit, and then from there where they go, does what they want to do have to be subject to plan commission review? Hopefully not, but all of those kinds of things. A little bit of one-stop shopping, kind of one-stop permitting process kinds of, or pathways through a regulatory environment are incredibly helpful.
Perfect. I think we have time to squeeze in one more question. And that one is in terms, again, of partnerships, capacity building, maybe even, working with something that might already exist and helping it become better. Have you worked at all with universities, even high schools, hospital systems, even sometimes have their, their own centers, regarding this? Can you talk a little bit about that and opportunities or case studies where it's been useful to work with a university or a high school or a hospital?
Molly, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. In a lot of instances, institutional buy-in into urban agriculture is something that can help pave the way for it to take place. Boston Medical Center has a rooftop garden. It's one of the first to have it, and it's still operating. Really cool, and it's actually in that area of Boston, because of some of the regulatory changes, because urban agriculture became popular and because there are so many people who are engaged, there's really an ecosystem of urban growing and food systems work. So there's an opportunity for the urban ag to be an impetus for some food access work and other opportunities. Also, school gardens are awesome, and they don't function over the summer when they really need a lot of attention. So the opportunity for schools or universities to pair with urban farmers, or even like give them a no-cost contract to come and farm the land themselves, that's a huge opportunity for both the school and for the farmer to get established and start to build a market for what they do. Marsha, would you add anything?
No, I would just say we've done almost all of those things, and I was going to go straight to Boston if you didn't on the rooftop farm there.
Okay, I think we're going to close up. There's still a ton of questions, some really great discussions that we just need to have you guys back again. That's really what it comes down to.
So if I can make a pitch very quickly for 2 PAS reports that are may seem a little old, but the basics in them are still good. I can't remember the PAS report number of the first one, but it has to do with planning for community food systems. I think it was published in 2008. And then there is PAS report number 563, which is healthy urban agriculture and healthy sustainable places, something like that. I forget the title, even though I'm one of the co-authors. And that in that report, and there are more contemporary things since then, but at the time we had done some surveying of jurisdictions to see who had good pieces of the regulatory environment that were best practices. And so for the folks on the webinar who've been asking about that, those are 2 places that it would be great to start. I want to double down again on the Growing Food Communities website, and which has lots and lots of policies and practices, a really good brief on the pathway to creating food policies in Buffalo, join the food division. There's a lot of opportunity there to talk about these very issues, especially in the policy work group. Hope you've enjoyed today. And there was a question about when the courses would be available in full. Molly.
Summertime. We'll put them this summer. And if you're interested, please fill out the evaluation form and let us know, because I can get in touch with you and you might be one of the first to pilot it.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you, Marsha. Thank you, Molly. So excited for the Food Systems Division to join us and to be a division. So join them. All the links are in the chat. We are recording the session. We'll post it on our YouTube channel. And also to you, Molly and Marsha, there's been quite a few requests for copies of the slide deck. So if you don't mind just emailing that to me, and I'll get that up on our website on Monday as well. All the information, again, can be found at ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. Don't forget to record those CM credits, and everyone have a great weekend, and we'll talk next time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.